Give him another round of applause. Indeed, God's going to trouble the water for sure. You're seeing it in your bulletin today. You're seeing it with some things that seem a little bit different than you're accustomed to in the service. It was great having the anthem right before I get started today. God is troubling the waters. Have you seen it around the world? Do you see what's going on in your neighborhoods? Do you see what's going on in businesses, in our country, in this world? The waters are being troubled all around the world. Now, sometimes those waters are troubled because we do it on our own. We get ourselves into trouble, and we read about it a little bit today. It says, "Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in the miry depths, where there is no foothold. I pray in the time, answer me, rescue me, deliver me, forgive me. I've gotten myself into trouble, and the waters are churning around me." Do you feel like that today? Do you feel like you have something going on in your life that's being stirred in your heart? Do you have trouble going on in your life right now? There is a lady, and I read about her and I thought, is this real? And I did some fact checking, and it's true. It was a migrant that came over from South Korea, and she decided she wanted to take her permit test to drive. And so she tried it once, twice, 3 times, 100 times, 200 times, 500 times, 949 times, and failed the permit test. Those 20 questions where you only need 60% to pass, she had a tough go of it. You know, it's easy to laugh, but she kept going, and 950 times she comes across the finish line. I don't want to see her in the car now, because that was just the written test. But can you relate to that? Because I can. Because in my times of sickness, in my times of struggle, when the water starts to come up and get up to here, I find that I don't call out to God as quickly as I complain. I find that I don't call out to God as much as I allow the tears to water my face, rather than the water of God to be troubled around me in such a way that it does something on the inside and makes me rise above the trouble and the struggle and the time. Now we see that right after, and it was right after Jesus feeds the 5,000, he sends his disciples off in a boat, and he dismisses that massive crowd, which was 5,000 to 15,000 people, because they don't count the women and children. They just said there was 5,000 men. And so we have this big crowd, and then Jesus goes up to a mountaintop, and this time it says he goes up to pray. And while he's praying, his disciples, who he put in a boat and sent across the Sea of Galilee, they've been on the water, and the water has been filled with wind and waves. Normally when a big wind cloud comes through, it goes for an hour, 2 hours. But they're on the lake 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12 p.m., 1, 2, 3. And in the last hour of the night, Jesus comes out walking on the water. And what does he say to them? Do you remember? What does he say to them? Take courage. In the original language, be of good cheer, cheer up. Now, in the English, we see that he says this. But I want to narrow it down, because I've been preaching this for months and months. But sometimes when we're in troubled waters, we don't listen. Did you listen to the hymns today? Or I don't know them. Is that what you came across? I don't know these hymns. Did you listen to the words? Because God was at work in those hymns. Did you look at the bulletin and say, oh, why is the anthem there? Or did you hear God speaking to you while just something little was turned out of your regular comfort zone? Did you listen? Was God speaking to you? Or were you too busy doing what I do when I get sick? Oh, not again. How did I get here? and I'm failing 949 times. But I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to fail anymore, and I don't want any of you to either. Because many of us have more money in the bank than 85% of the world. Many of us have better health than 85% of the world. Many of us live in the greatest country in the world than 85% of the world, right? We have it made here, yet every time a little something happens, every time things don't go our way, we fail the permit test 949 times. But Jesus says this: take courage, cheer up, be of good cheer. It is I. But when you read it in the original language, that's not what exactly he says. We just defined it into English. He says, cheer up, I am. The Lord, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. They would recognize that. God is here. God is near. Cheer up. Have courage. I am. Do not be afraid. I am with you. Do you hear the words? God is speaking deep to you today. Or did you say, oh, I don't know that song? And God is saying it to you today. I go before you always. Come follow me. When the Israelites had to cross to come into the promise that was always theirs. But there's this flood. There's this troubled water in front of them. It is roaring at flood stage. And if you just went over the bridge here on our expressway here just recently, would you have stepped into that Susquehanna River even 1 inch? It was roaring. It was in the trees. It was creating ponds. It was doing everything. It was scary. When I heard of people going down there and walking down there, I'd never go down there. Well, imagine the Jordan. Imagine this flood stage. But the promise is in front of them, but the waters are raging right before them. And God says, take my presence with you. You are priests. Carry it, and once you step your foot into the water, it will part. But until you do that, you will never take the step towards the promise, towards the dry land, towards the purpose I have for you. You need to step out in faith. Yes, I know what you see. Yes, I know what you hear. I know what you feel. But you have to put all of that aside, because I am not trapped by time or space, and my promises are sure, and they are now whence you step into the water. Are you listening today? Are you listening today? Yes. I hope so, because God is speaking to us today. This is what it says. This is on the back of all your prayer cards. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Verse 13. For I am the Lord. Listen. For I am the Lord. Capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. It is printed in the Bible like that, so it makes no mistake. You know exactly what he's saying. I am the promise-keeping. I am the self-sustaining. There are none other before me. There will be none after me. And I make this promise to you. I am the Lord your God, who takes hold of your right hand and says to you, do not fear, I will help you. Do not be afraid. He goes on to say this, all throughout Isaiah, I am the Lord your God. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. I will take hold of your hand. I will keep you, and I will make you to be a covenant to be my people, and a light to the Gentiles, to open the eyes of the blind, to free captives from prison, to release from the dungeon those who sit in darkness. But now the Lord says this, he who created you, he who formed you, fear not. Listen, God keeps speaking to these things, but we want it to be in a comfortable space. We love to get the goosebumps while we're sitting in our comfortable place, and God says, fear not. But usually the time you need to hear fear not and respond to it is in the time of testing and in the time of trial. I'm so glad that this bell's here. I saw it glimmer out of the corner of my eye without my glasses on. If my glasses were on, the shine wouldn't have been there. Have you ever gone to the shore in New Jersey and heard out in those deep waters this sound? Have you ever heard those buoys go? When the water's raging, it brings out music inside of the buoys. It tells you what's going on the inside from what's happening on the outside. If what's happening on the outside didn't happen, the music wouldn't take place. There's a lot of people. We are an intimate group here today. This is not as big of a service of people as we've been accustomed to. It's intimate. Many people are home. They are sick. They are dealing with things physically, mentally, emotionally, financially. But you have been gathered here today for a specific purpose, gathered by God, not for some political agenda, not for some personal gain, but for so much more. Corporately and personally with God relationally, to go deeper, to go deeper, to go deeper. And so Jesus is out on the water. He says to you as he says to the group. Now there were 12 in that boat that day, but only one responded in anything but fear. Lord, if it is you. And we give him a bad time all the time. Peter's impulsive. Peter gets into trouble all the time. Peter can't keep his mouth shut. This is what it says. Lord, if it is you, tell me to come. And you think, well, that's crazy, right? Isn't it crazy for someone to say something like that? But he knew the invitation of Christ. He recognized it. He's been invited to his table. He's been invited to discipleship. He's been invited to become a fisher of men. He knows the voice. He knows when the invitation comes that he'll respond. And Christ says to him, come. I didn't see Matthew. I didn't see Nathaniel. I didn't see any of those other boys jumping out of the boat in that moment. I didn't see anybody else responding, but this impulsive guy who gets a bad rap all the time comes out of the boat, and he does what only one other person has ever done in the history of mankind. Peter walks on water, just like his master, just like his teacher. He walks on the water and he begins to go toward Christ. He's focused on the author and the finisher of his faith. He's not turning to the right or the left, but there's wind and there are waves. And he begins to feel the droplets on his face. He begins to hear the wind, and Christ's voice isn't so loud now. He's not seeing the light in the darkness, Jesus Christ, the light to the Gentiles. He's focused on now his fear. He's focused on what would make anyone afraid. Even though Christ is there, he begins to sink. We do that, don't we? This wonderful woman, 949 times on her way. But how many more times have we failed in our test of faith? How many more times does Jesus bid us to come out on the water, to stop complaining, to stop arguing, to stop gossiping, and to come to the waters that provide you something that you will never thirst again? Are you listening this morning? Are you paying attention? Peter sinks. When he saw the wind, he was afraid. He began to sink and did what we should do as soon as the trouble comes. He cries out to the Lord, Lord, save me. Circle it immediately. Lord, save me immediately. Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, why do you doubt? And in the original language, and I don't know if I got this right, but it's almost like a nickname he gives him here. He doesn't say you of little faith, he says little faith and picks him up. Like little one, little faith. Why did you doubt? Why? We ask God questions as we sink, and he asks, why did you doubt? He picks him up. They get into the boat. Now, this isn't the first time they've been on the water with trouble. The first time Christ was in the boat and in their comfort zone with them, and they were freaking out, and Christ was sleeping on a pillow. They complained and they argued and they cried out until finally they went to him, who was in the same boat, and said, do you care if we die? Will you save us? He says, peace be still. And the wind and the waves calm. When they brought him into the boat, in this particular testimony, when they brought him in, the wind and the waves calmed down. And the problem is, and why we fail our test time and time again, we try so hard to fix it ourselves instead of inviting Christ into the ark of agreement, which is our heart, and invite him to come in and guide us. And then when we put our foot on the water, we are empowered by the Spirit of God, and we can do as Peter did. But we do as Peter did as well every time the trouble comes, and we forget, even though Christ is right in front of us. Are you hearing me this morning? Am I going on and on? The reason that I started this series, and it's a series, it's called Water and Fire. Do we enjoy being in drought? See, too many times we want to be comfortable, but we don't realize that we are dehydrated from the things that keep us going, from the purpose that is ours, from the presence that surrounds us. But we're so focused on just staying in our little box that we don't allow God to go deeper with us. George Mueller, who's one of the greatest men of faith in all of history, now he would never say that because he was a humble man, but I'll say it for him. He said, God delights to increase the faith of his children. We ought, instead of wanting no trials, no exercise for patience, to be willing to take from God's hand as a means and deliberately the obstacles, the difficulties, and sometimes the defeats, for they are the very food of faith. If you don't eat, what eventually happens? You'll die. If you don't drink, it's even faster. Christ bids us to come into the water. 3 stories here today, true stories, true accounts, where Christ, in the midst of turmoil, delivers them. He says this, I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in his word I hope. I am confident. I believe God's word, and I hope, wait in expectation for it to come to pass. More than the watchman for the morning, I am eager. More than the watchman for the morning, he says it twice. I am eager, I am ready, I am confident this will come. For with the Lord there is steadfast love, with him plentiful redemption. He will relieve me from the troubles that I have got myself into. I pray to the Lord in the time of your favor. In your great love, O God, you bring your salvation. These are people just like us, and they didn't have the comforts we have. Their floors in their house weren't marble. They weren't that high-tech granite countertops that we have. They lived much harsher lives than we did. And that's what they said. So if they can do that in the rubble of their homes, how much more can we do in our beautiful carpeted floors where we could walk barefoot and have pedicures and manicures and so forth, right? God is calling us to a much deeper place. He is saying, if you hear my voice, I am God. I am near. Bring me into this test, and I will increase your faith. Bring about the miracle. Peter participated fully in a miracle that goes beyond physics and goes beyond anything that we could even imagine. If I just walked out here today and just walked across water, you would think that was pretty crazy. I had a whole bunch to share with you today, but I realize where I'm at, and I don't want to miss it. I'm going to turn this other microphone on, Jeff. And if you could mark the camera as I come down as well, I'd appreciate it.